You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.
I said, hey, welcome to the Man Cave Happy Hour. I said, hey, welcome to the Man Cave Happy Hour. We're gonna drink a fine whiskey and smoke a really fine cigar. I said, hey, ladies, welcome to the Man Cave Happy Hour. I said, hey, ladies, welcome to the Man Cave Happy Hour. You're welcome to drink our whiskey and smoke our really fine cigars. One more time, boys. I said, hey, welcome to the Man Cave Happy Hour. I said, hey, welcome to the Man Cave Happy Hour. We're gonna smoke a really good cigar and drink a really fine whiskey.
Hey, Chris. Welcome to the happy hour.
It's the Man Cave Happy Hour.
It's whiskey, cigars, spirits, and the stories that go along with it. And Chris, from what we understand, you got some stories about the Jack Daniel Distillery that you can really share because you're really invested in it from a family standpoint. So, Chris, tell us a little bit about you being the assistant master distiller right now. What are your roots and how are you connected to the distillery?
Sure, yeah. Well, I grew up here in Lynchburg, and my grandfather was the master distiller here for many years. He started working here in 1957.
Wow.
Back when, Jack Daniel's was just a small regional whiskey brand, really, and became master distiller in 1966 and retired in that role in 1989. So when I was a kid, he was still in charge of all the whiskey production, and then so I was around the distillery, with him sometimes a lot of times on Sunday. He'd have to go in, and I guess that was kind of a slow work day. So that was the afternoon that I could go in and kind of tag along, and of course, I didn't know anything about whiskey, as a boy. It was just a time for me to be with Papa and kind of poke around, push a button here or there, I guess,
I love it. I love it. So how did you work your way into becoming an employee and then actually moving up to an assistant master distiller?
Well, I started, I guess, first of all, to lay a little background. Lynchburg's a really small place. There's only about 600 people that live in our town.
Oh, wow.
And then, it's really small. And so then countywide, there's only about 6,000. So we're the second smallest county in the state of Tennessee, and I tell you that just as you get to be a teenager and you're looking to go away to college, you don't really anticipate moving back to Lynchburg when you're 18 years old. Right. and I was certainly in that thought. I never really thought of working for the distillery, even though my grandfather was a distiller. And I went away, however, and was studying chemistry. Mm-hmm. And about halfway through, after my second year, I came home, and I needed a job for the summer, and my roommate from school wanted to take the tour and visit the distillery. Of course, he was interested in Jack Daniel's and whiskey making, and I said, well, sure, we'll go take the tour. It's right down the street. So we went, and then just kind of a light bulb moment, and I thought, wow, what a great summer job. A tour guide just gets paid to talk. And and so that's how I started, and one thing led for the other, chemistry and whiskey. There's certainly some overlap.
Sure.
There's quite a bit of science involved, and one thing after the other. And honestly, a couple years later, I graduated, and I was just really lucky because the company was hiring a chemist in the research and development department.
Wow.
And that department actually sits in Louisville, Kentucky, because we're part of the Brown-Forman Corporation based in Louisville, Kentucky. And so I interviewed for the job, and luckily I got it, and kind of, did some various jobs in R&D and worked my way through other distilling jobs. And now for the last 5 years or so, I've been back home at Jack Daniel's.
That's fantastic. What year did you start as a tour guide or doing the tours there at the distillery?
Let's see.
I'm going to test your knowledge here.
Tour. Yeah, right. I know. It was in May of 2001, I believe, was when I gave
You're
my
a young
first
guy.
tour.
What were you, like 15 or something?
I was 19.
19. Okay. Because you're a young
Yeah,
cat.
I was
So.
19. Yeah, it's kind of funny, you know. Every employee gets a free bottle of Jack Daniel's Old Number 7 every month with their paycheck.
Wow.
Unless you're a 19-year-old tour guide, you do not get that. I did not. I had to, of course, wait until I was 21.
Oh, that's great.
Well, at least they're paying attention. That's good.
Yeah.
I love that.
Oh, that's an interesting fact.
It is.
Yeah,
I'm looking
we
at
call that Good Friday. Everybody comes to work on Good Friday.
That's it. I teach high school, so my summers are open. I'm thinking, I think I might apply for a summer gig.
There you go.
So, Chris, we opened it up. I belong to a few Facebook groups, bourbon fans on Facebook, and I said, hey, I'm going to be talking to Chris Fletcher later on. Anybody have a question I should ask him? And they told me to ask about a guy named Nathan Nearest Green. Do you know anything about Nathan Nearest Green?
Oh, absolutely. Great question. Yes. So that takes us back to the very roots of our distillery and Jack Daniel himself. And Jack was a real person. He was he was born here in Lynchburg, and he's not some figurehead or some mythical marketing creature. He was a real whiskey maker and made and sold and marketed his own whiskey. And Nathan Nearest Green was really the man who was very much the mentor of Jack Daniel as he was learning the art of whiskey making, and is actually who we consider our first, what we would say today is a master distiller, the person that Jack Daniel entrusted in running his distillery operations once he got his business up and running. So Nathan Nearest Green, actually, when Jack was a young boy, he was basically orphaned. His mother passed away when he was very, very young, and his dad passed away a few years later. So he was taken in by another family in Lynchburg, the Call family, and the Calls had a distillery on their farm, and Mr. Dan Call was also a minister in the town. And so on the farm, Nathan Nearest Green was the whiskey maker. Now, at this point in history, Nathan Green was an enslaved man. But young Jack, probably around the age of 7 or 8, we don't know for sure because we don't have a birth record, Dan Call introduced Jack to Nearest Green and said, Nearest is the best whiskey maker that I know of.
Wow.
He's in charge of making all the whiskey here on the Call farm. And so if we fast forward a few years, two things happen. Number one, the whiskey business is really good. It's growing. And so does that church. And eventually that church goes to Mr. Call and says, you know what, you're going to have to pick a spirit, right? We don't think it's right for you to make whiskey 6 days a week and then on Sunday you're leading the church. So at that point in time with that ultimatum, he sold the still to young Jack Daniel, who at this time is a teenager. He had saved up some money.
Wow.
And the first thing that Jack did was hire Nearest Green to make his whiskey for him.
Wow,
and of course, by this time, Mr. Green was a free man, and he became what we consider the first master distiller for the Jack Daniel distillery.
And so his knowledge and skill has been passed down to the master distillers throughout. So you have a college degree in chemistry. And you're an assistant master distiller. So where have you gained your knowledge of master distillery? Is it through the books or has it been handed down from your grandfather and the current master distiller?
I've been very fortunate to work with a lot of great distillers and people in our industry. And honestly, two of the most influential are my grandfather, Frank Bobo, my mom's dad, obviously. I mean, he, being a master distiller for as many years, being involved with production here at Jack Daniel's for over 30 years. And he's still a resource to me. He's 89 years old, and it's amazing what he can remember from whiskey production. And to have that historical knowledge is really empowering for what we do at the distillery now, and as we look towards the future to have that. And then, of course, Jeff Arnett, who I work for now, who's just been a fantastic resource for me. I've known Jeff for many, many years. back to my days as a chemist with the company, and Jeff was working in quality control down here in Lynchburg, and he's great to work for now. So I would say, the great thing about whiskey making is there's this really, really great blend of science and kind of art or romance or folklore or, however you want to call it. And that's what makes, I think, the industry so special. And then, of course, at Jack Daniel's, number one with the quality of whiskey we make. And then, of course, with our history, it's so rich. It's such a great company to work for and a great brand to work for.
So the link, it's called the Lincoln County process, right? Is that kind of what you guys have coined it? The process in which Jack Daniel's comes to be?
Yeah. Yeah, you see that. Yeah, that's referring to the charcoal mellowing process.
Right. And is that unique to you guys?
We did not invent that.
Okay.
I'm sorry, was there
is that unique to you guys?
No, it's not. So what's referred to as the Lincoln County process, now that term was kind of coined really more as a marketing term back in the day, I think, as a point of differentiation between our friends in Kentucky that make a lot of bourbon whiskeys, which, of course, are made all over the United States now, not only in Kentucky. Right. You can make bourbon in all 50 states. But probably somebody in all 50 states, is trying to make bourbon.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But Tennessee whiskey, number one, must qualify as bourbon, right? So we must meet that first. And then with the additional requirements of we have to do it only in the state of Tennessee. You can't do it anywhere in the country. And then secondly, it must be filtered, or as we say, mellowed through some form of maple charcoal. Mm-hmm. So, technically you could take one little tiny briquette, right, and put it in a tank of 1,000 gallons and that would work. Mm-hmm. Now we don't do that, but it is up to the distiller to decide how they want to mellow their Tennessee whiskey. We have a very traditional process in place, quite simply because that's the way my grandfather did it. That's the way that the Motlow family taught him, who was Jack Daniel's family, and Nearest Green taught Jack Daniel. And so we actually take 10 feet of charcoal that we make from scratch on site at the distillery. We pack it really, really tight, so the flow rate is about 1 gallon a minute, so it's really slowly dripping through. The process takes between 2 and 3 days.
My goodness.
And this is all happening right after distillation, but prior to barrel aging. So the whiskey's clear. The whiskey goes into the charcoal clear, and it comes out of the charcoal clear. The charcoal does not add anything. It's actually like a filter. So if you've got like a water filter at home, a lot of them actually contain charcoal.
Right.
And, if you have that, if you run your water through that charcoal filter, you know that the charcoal doesn't add flavor to your water. It removes things that you don't want in that water. And so it's kind of the same sort of process for us.
All right. So that brings us to the water, right?
That was going to be my question. Tell us a little bit about the water that you guys are utilizing through this process when you're distilling the Jack Daniels. Or Jack Daniels.
Right. Well, we're very fortunate when it comes to water because Jack actually found our current distillery site in the late 1860s, early 1870s. There was this cave spring. Well, it still is there, obviously. But we have a cave that sits right at the head of the distillery, and underground is about 2 miles deep of a reservoir of water that basically bubbles up from underground springs and floods this cave. So the mouth of the cave is right there at the distillery, and we source the water from underground, so it's never exposed to air or anything. We actually have pipes that go in under the ground that we will pump the water out, and that water is only used to make our whiskey. So that's, obviously we have a lot of limestone here in Tennessee, right. Very calcium, mineral-rich water, but it is iron-free. It doesn't contain any iron. That's something that as a distiller you wouldn't want in the water that will react with alcohol and make it very bitter and black. So it really, truly is about the perfect water to make whiskey.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, it's because we're here in the Metro Detroit area, and out of the Podcast Detroit studios, and the Great Lakes here in Michigan. And there are so many people after our water in Michigan. There's these large companies, you'd probably associate the name with the chocolate people. We won't go any further than that, but they are taking gallons upon gallons upon gallons upon gallons of water out of our state and out of our lakes. So what's Jack Daniel's doing to protect your water?
That's a very good question. So we actually own several hundred acres around this cave spring, all the property behind it, and so there's no other industrial manufacturing. There's not even any real farms up around it because obviously rainwater could affect what gets into that cave,
right?
And so we go to that length, and then we do have the cave inspected from time to time. We've had people go all the way in, map out everything, looking at the integrity of the cave, making sure that it's healthy, and it always has been. And the flow of water out of that cave, when we have good rainfall, which here lately we've had plenty of good rainfall, but it makes such an excess of water for us. We don't even come close to the capacity of what that cave spring is producing. Now, even so, obviously, this is such a critical natural resource for us. We tank this water. We've installed enough tank capacity to hold over 10 million gallons of just this cave spring water, just in case we have a year of drought or something like that. We know that we're going to be able to go into those tanks and source the water that we need.
Right. That's amazing because depending on what chart you look at or what report, Jack Daniel's is the number one selling whiskey in the U.S. and the world. But if not, you're in the top 3 in pretty much any report you're gonna find. Mm-hmm. What is the volume that you're putting out a year?
As far as the total case count, we're probably at about that 12 million case mark, somewhere along in there.
Yes, sir. May I have another?
Holy smokes, that's a lot of Jack Daniels.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as a distiller, that's a ballpark figure.
Sure.
As a distiller, once it comes out of the barrel, I'm done with it. Right. So, trust me, our bottling people don't want me down there in their way. So that's the way I like to keep it too.
Well, let's talk about the barrels, right? Because that's besides the filtering and the water, you got to age it in barrels. So how long is just your old number 7, the regular Jack Daniel's, the Tennessee whiskey that everybody's familiar with? Mm-hmm. How long is that aged, and what is the barreling process for that?
Sure. So after the charcoal, the whiskey is clear as water still. There's no color to it. There is some flavor to it as well. A lot of new make, bourbon type, Tennessee whiskey type recipes have a lot of a corn flavor to it because you have to be mostly corn to follow those bourbon and Tennessee whiskey laws that we have. However, the charcoal absorbs a little bit of that corn flavor. Okay. That's kind of the magic, so to speak, of what charcoal does for us. And so the whiskey goes into that barrel really able to, I think, take on the unique character of our barrels. And of course, the great thing about what we're able to do here in Lynchburg at Jack Daniel's is control every piece of the process with our own hands. So, we don't outsource anything. We want to try to control as much as possible, and that includes our barrel. And so we actually, not only do we make our own barrels, our own employees every day are making brand new charred oak barrels for Jack Daniel's. We actually have our own stave mills where we're actually buying the logs of oak that is coming in there, and we have our own employees cutting down those logs into the staves, so all the way back to the logger, we're controlling that barrel. And so it's such an important part of the process because 100% of our color is naturally extracted out of that oak barrel, and then over half the flavor. And so the barrel is the number one ingredient. And so it is, such the advantage to be able to control that number one ingredient, basically from the forest all the way to the glass.
So where are those logs? Where are those logs coming from?
The logs, basically, if you consider Missouri all the way into Tennessee, even northern Alabama, and then up across, Kentucky to Ohio as well. Wow. So almost you would say kind of that not really southeast or Midwest, but basically the corridor from the Ozarks to the Appalachians. we can source wood from any of those areas, and our stave mills are scattered about. We have one in Alabama, I have one in Tennessee, got one up in Ohio and Kentucky. So they're strategically located to be near where the logs are coming from. And then, of course, those stave mills will supply the wood, the staves, into our cooperages. And we have 2 cooperages, one in Louisville, Kentucky, and then one just down the street from Lynchburg in the northern tip of Alabama, where we're making our barrels for Jack Daniels.
You know, I'm going to take you back, Chris, to your R&D days. So one of the popular things that I'm seeing right now out here in the Detroit market is the honey whiskey, the honeyed Jack Daniels that's out there. For an R&D standpoint, what is the time it takes from when you create something to when it actually hits the market?
Yeah, that's a great question. It really depends on what type of product that you want to do. So the honey flavored whiskey that we make, that's taking the old No. 7 classic Tennessee whiskey as a base and then adding the honey to that. So that type of a product, as a distiller, I'm not directly involved with that development.
Sure.
But it's fairly quick, let's say, as compared to if we wanted to make, for example, our new rye whiskey. So we now have a straight rye whiskey that's been on the market about a year and a half. That obviously takes years because of the aging process. The aging process at Jack Daniels typically is between 4 years on a minimum, up to about 7 or 8 years at a maximum. Wow. That's a rule of thumb, depending on Mother Nature and how warm our summers get. We don't artificially heat any houses or anything. So we're not held to one number or one age, but it will typically bounce between 4 and 7 years. Now, a product like the honey, which is probably about our fastest growing product out there, it's been wildly successful. With that, that is technically a flavored whiskey, or it's actually considered a distilled spirit specialty because we're adding those honey flavors to the whiskey on the back end, blending that, and then bottling it.
Wow. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, because there's been several, and again, Matt and I, the reason we do the Man Cave Happy Hour is we've enjoyed whiskey. We like a good cigar here and there,
right.
But we're not like super deep, knowledgeable people. So what we do is we like to talk to people like you, Chris, that know what they're talking about, so we can learn. Yeah. And so from our very novice observations, it seems like in the last probably 6 years, there's been a bit of an explosion in the whiskey and bourbon industry.
There's been a resurgence going on.
Yeah, and Jack has really got some stuff going on because you got the barrel proof and the single barrel and the Heritage Reserve and the Sinatra Select and the Old 27. Are these new ventures within the last handful of years, or is this something Jack's been doing and we just haven't noticed?
Well, I think maybe a little of both. Okay. I think number one, you're absolutely right. There is this resurgence of American whiskeys, and people globally are recognizing American whiskeys for the quality and the purity that goes into them. So if you look, for instance, Jack Daniels, is a Tennessee whiskey, and you look at the regulations that go to Tennessee whiskey. Number one, you must qualify entirely to the bourbon code, with the addition geographic restriction and the additional process of charcoal mellowing. So you look at that requirement to call yourself a Tennessee whiskey, and that's one of the most stringent spirits requirements anywhere in the world that you'll find. And so people are starting to understand this about not only Tennessee whiskeys, but bourbon whiskeys and American rye whiskeys and the quality that goes behind them. And so that has driven innovation, honestly, to a height that, I don't know that we've ever truly seen it at this level. Even if you go back to the bourbon glory years, the 50s, the classic cocktails, the 60s, when bourbon was really doing well. I don't know. Of course, I wasn't alive then, but I don't know if you saw the industry.
But I've seen reruns of Mad Men. I know what's going on. Yeah.
But my point is, you're very much correct. We are innovating at a rate now that we've really never done. Now, you also have to take a step back and think about Jack Daniels too. Right. So in my grandfather's career, for instance, the old No. 7 standard black label was pretty much the only whiskey that they produced. and it was actually on an allocation system almost his entire career. So if you think about that, old number 7 traditional Jack Daniel's was on an allocation system until about 1980.
What does that mean, an allocation system?
That means that, for instance, let's say you guys are in Detroit and you walk into your local bar or package store and ask for Jack Daniel's, and the person behind the counter says, well, I tried to order some. And I wanted to order 5 cases, but they told me that I could only order 5 bottles because that's all they had to sell me.
Fair. Okay.
And so, yeah, we were that way until 1980, believe it or not, only making old number 7. So, all these expressions that we have now, the single barrel collection that we have, which is magnificent, or the honey flavored whiskey, which people love as well. We want to have a product for someone to be able to enjoy our whiskey in their own way. And, we just, of course, always ask them to enjoy that responsibly. But obviously, we want something for the tried and true classic whiskey drinker. And then we also want somebody to be able to be introduced to our brand with something that, basically with Tennessee honey, it's almost like a cocktail in a bottle.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So, all right. So we have, because we needed to taste while we were talking with you. I picked up last year, one of the single barrel proofs. And it was just at my local grocery store at the Kroger, the Michigan chain here. And it's 65.85%. It's 131.7 proof. This single barrel.
It's yummy.
Yeah. And I didn't have any just old number 7. So I picked up a 5th old number 7 on the way into the studio. And I blind poured them for Matt. I know what was in each cup, but I blind poured them for Matt.
See, I'm sipping on both of them, on Chris and Jamie. One of them is a little bit lighter in color.
Okay.
The other one, a little bit darker. But they both just they have that wonderful bite, that spicy bite at the end of it. But I'm going to, because I'd already tasted these two, Chris. I'm going to say Jamie as well.
Okay. What do you think? Which one's which?
I think the lighter one is the single barrel. And then the darker one is the number 7. That's what I'm going to go with.
I wish I had my sound effects set up to say, is that fat, drunk, and stupids know to go through life, son. You're wrong. No, actually, it's vice versa. Yeah, so the darker one was the single barrel with the higher proof.
Really?
So, yeah, but Chris, when we're trying this, when we're trying the old number 7 compared to the single barrel, what should we be noticing different between the two?
Well, I think, to kind of to build on what you're tasting there, I think number 1, it's such a great exercise that you're sitting there with old number 7 and slowly sipping, thinking about what you're tasting, thinking about the appearance, the color of the whiskey. I meet so many people that say that, if I lead a tasting and we sip on old number 7 nice and slow, the amount of flavor, the complexity that's in that glass, they're really surprised because, maybe they've only ever mixed it, right? They've only ever done or had a Jack and Coke, or something like that, which is, hey, great cocktail. However, there's a lot of great flavor in that glass itself. And really kind of the first clue as the difference between these two samples is the color. And so if you think about it with a barrel proof expression of our single barrel, what that means is we're not adding any water on the back end. So that whiskey goes in clear at 125 proof. And depending on evaporation, it's going to go up to, would you say 131.7, I think you said.
Yeah. This one, because it's funny because I'll see these on the shelves and the proofs vary from bottle to bottle. Yeah. It's interesting.
They do.
Yeah. Well, yes, this is 131.7.
Yes. And so that gives you immediately the color, lets you know there's less water because we haven't reduced it down to 90 or 80 or 94 for regular single barrel. So that right away tells you that, you're going to have more of that unique barrel flavor character in there just because, we haven't added any water to it. So whatever it comes out of the barrel at for our single barrel proof is what you're going to get in that bottle. And so we refer to that as distiller's privilege here in Lynchburg. So myself and Jeff, we can go to a barrel house,
right?
Anytime we want to and take our drill and sample a barrel and see what we think about it.
Huh.
Not many other people get to do that.
No.
However, with our single barrel proof, it's the closest thing you can get to coming to a barrel house and just walking down that rick, walking down the row, sampling a few different barrels. Is because, like you said, each bottle, when they come from different barrels, they're going to be completely different alcohol content and different flavors as well. Now, they're all going to be Jack Daniels at their core, obviously.
Sure.
However, you'll have some barrels that are smokier, spicier, sweeter, and so that's the fun of it, because Mother Nature and that barrel and where that barrel has been sitting in a barrel house for, single barrel 5 to 7 years typically, she's going to put that fingerprint on the flavor that we can't control. And that's where the science kind of turns into art.
So,
right? As much as we know, as much as we've done in our 153 years almost here making whiskey, we're really good. We're really consistent. But at the end of the day, Mother Nature's going to take over. And that's the fun part with single barrel whiskeys.
Yeah, so this one, the label is, it's got Jeff's autograph on it, and it's telling me it came out of Rick number L19. So do you know right where that is?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the house that it came out of, yes. I could take you right to L19.
Isn't that great?
L19 or L22?
L19, yep.
L19,
L19.
L19. Yeah.
Remember that? Do you remember that one, Chris?
It's really confusing.
His name was Steve.
We have the L's and we have the R's.
Okay.
So the L's mean the left side of the barrel house, and the R's mean the right side
Oh,
of the barrel house.
Right.
Easy enough.
Yep, and then 22 would be the 22nd Rick, which a Rick is just what we call a row of a barrel house.
Okay.
So you just start at 1, walk all the way down to 22, and then that's where that barrel came from.
All right, so just a little bit more if you got a little bit of time.
Sure.
All right, so the some of the specials you have, I wanted to talk about 2 of them. One would be the Old 27, but first, the Sinatra Select. So what is different about the Sinatra Select? What is it? It's the Jack Daniel's Sinatra Select, because the boy's been dead for a while. Love him.
Yeah.
But so what is this? How did it come to be? And what's different about the Sinatra Select?
Sure. We introduced this product a few years ago, just prior to when Frank, had he still been living, would have been 100.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
And so we wanted to commemorate kind of his legacy along with Jack's legacy.
Yeah.
Jack Daniels and music goes back, honestly, even before Frank Sinatra, believe it or not. Jack Daniel himself, he actually had his own bands here in Lynchburg that he would hire to come and play in town. Yeah, because back in the early days in Lynchburg, he owned a couple of saloons in town. So he would hire bands to come and play to bring people into town to then frequent his saloons. And
Love
so
that.
music and Jack Daniels really has been hand in hand ever since. And then, of course, as Frank Sinatra, he was introduced to our brand in the late 40s, maybe early 50s. Legend has it by Jackie Gleason. And again, at this point in our time period, we were pretty much an unknown brand, especially up in, say, New York City, right?
Right.
Very, very small whiskey from down in Tennessee. But as soon as Frank tries it, he falls in love with it. And so he starts, regularly seeking it out.
Yep.
He started going out on stage, holding up a glass and calling it Nectar of the Gods. And of course, those years of allocation that I was telling you about.
Yeah.
We owe a lot of that to Frank Sinatra.
Nice.
Our sales just exploded, and we could not keep up.
Wow.
And we never paid him. We've never paid for any celebrity endorsement. Even in our advertising and our commercials, you don't see celebrities. You see real distillery workers here in Lynchburg that make our product.
I love that. I do. I love the campaign you guys got going right now with just everybody down there. It's a fantastic campaign.
Very, very family oriented.
Yeah,
really
I like
enjoy
it.
that aspect.
Right. And that's the way Lynchburg is. Like I say, it's a town of 600 people. We do one thing really well, and that's make whiskey. And a lot of there's some families here that we can trace back generationally, to Jack Daniel's time and making whiskey. So, we are proud of making great Tennessee whiskey. Myself and my family has been involved, but there's lots of other families as well. And obviously it takes a great team of distillers down here to make our product. But yeah, the story with the Sinatra.
Yeah. What specifically in the process? Is there something unique in the process for the Sinatra Select?
It is. Yeah. So there's a special barrel that we use. The marketing team came to us for this idea of honoring Frank. And so they wanted classic Jack Daniel's Old Number 7 because that's what Frank drank. But they wanted a little twist. They wanted something a little bolder, something with a little bite, but still smooth. And because they felt like, that's what, Frank kind of embodied, right?
Yeah.
And so we had been experimenting with barrels. And, basically to follow the guide of Tennessee whiskey, the only thing that adds flavor is just grain and water and barrel, really. And so to drive new flavors into our whiskey and keep it a straight Tennessee whiskey, what we did was we started to play with the inside of that barrel before we put the whiskey in. And so once the barrel is made, we toast the inside, basically like toasting them, just the sugars.
Okay.
And then we char it. And so a char is a flame that will actually create a char layer, which will allow that whiskey to penetrate better into those rich toasted flavors of the barrel. That's where you get color and flavor of the whiskey. So for the Sinatra barrels, we took that barrel that had been toasted and charred, and we started to cut down into the stave and to cut these grooves, basically creating a rifle effect. So this groove that would go all the way down the interior of that barrel. And if you think about what happens there, then when the whiskey goes in with that deep groove cut all the way into the inside of the barrel, it will absorb into the layers of the wood much more quickly than it would without that cut there. Wow. And so the result is you extract more of that oak flavor from the barrel.
Creates more surface area and so more flavor.
Exactly.
Wow.
Right. You got it.
Yeah.
That's the idea behind it. And so when we were approached around creating this, little spin on Old Number 7 for Frank Sinatra and for his whiskey, basically, we said, well, we've been playing with these groove barrels. What do you think? And they tasted it and they loved it. And so it just kind of went from there.
I love it.
Wow.
So and as you were doing that, I started dancing over here and singing "Groove Is in the Heart," and because Matt and I are both also DJs too. So sorry, if you heard us giggling a little bit behind that, that's what that was. But so what about the number 27, the double-barreled Tennessee whiskey, that extra matured? What is that guy? That's a special one, right?
Yes.
Is that new?
It is. It's fairly new. It's been in some different markets, and it is a limited product that we do right now because, and you said it in the name, it is double-barreled. And so that's the only double-barreled whiskey that we currently do.
So you jump from one barrel to another?
You got it, yes. So we know that Tennessee whiskey, like I've said earlier, it's got to spend at least 4 years for us in that new oak barrel.
Mm-hmm. That's your policy.
And for the gold, the 27 gold, we take it out of that oak barrel, and then we put it into a second barrel, which is a maple barrel that we also make. And so that maple wood really creates kind of a nice, soft, sweet, creamy mouth feel, kind of a brown sugar, butterscotchy sweetness. It really brings a nice depth of those kind of sweet brown notes that you get from the wood of that barrel. However, the one thing about these maple barrels, they're beautiful barrels. The gorgeous maple wood, and they make a beautiful whiskey when you taste that whiskey. But they leak really, really bad. They leak, and we lose a lot. So that's why I say that product is still a little bit limited. But have no fear, we're making more. And so
you should send one up here so we can try it out.
Or we'll come down there and try it out. There you go.
That's it. All right, two more real quick questions for you. As in the Facebook group, a couple of people asked. Garrett asked if the Bottle and Bond is going to become a U.S. release. Is that does that make sense to you? I know you might not know. This might be a marketing thing that you may or may not know, but.
Right. Yeah, it does kind of get back to being the distillery. Once it's in the bottle, it's a little bit out of my hands.
Fair play. All right. So here's another one then. When are they coming out with a barrel proof rye? Will you do a barrel proof on the rye?
That's a very good question. That's something that I get to taste our rye whiskey at barrel strength as well. It's something that we have looked at. There's no immediate plans on the launch on that. I think as we look at any innovation, I think being from Jack Daniel's, there's an expectation for what we put out there, and I think that's a good thing. Consumers kind of demand it, from Jack Daniel's. They want to know. They want to know, the facts about it. How it's made and what it is, and then we kind of feel that responsibility to, if we're going to put out a new whiskey, we've got to make sure that it's right for Jack Daniel's as well. So, no immediate plans for a barrel strength rye whiskey right now.
Right.
But certainly in the future, you could see something like that.
And last one, Eric Church is on tour right now, and you guys are doing a special medal for a barrel proof for him. Was Eric involved in picking these barrels, or are you guys? What's going on with the promotion with Eric and his signature barrel proof?
Sure, certainly. Now, Eric, his single barrels are 94 proof. They're our standard single barrel whiskey, which is offered at a consistent 94 proof. That's the way Eric prefers his whiskey. He's been to the distillery a couple times. In fact, he and his wife were just down a few weeks ago and picking some barrels. And it's always fun to have them down in Lynchburg and are great people. And so he knows exactly the type of whiskey that he's looking for, and Jeff and myself know kind of the flavor that Eric likes as well. Nice. He's had multiple barrels in the past. I don't know how many that he's necessarily on now for his own, personal barrel. However, we do have the kind of the promotion that benefits Eric and Catherine Church's their charity.
Yeah. Yes.
Which is, I think, probably the product that you were referring to.
Yes.
Yeah, the Chief Cares Fund.
Yeah.
And so that is our Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Select. So that's our 94 proof. And it does come with the unique medallion, which hangs around the neck of the bottle. And the little gift carton is also logoed as well. And so those are going into the cities where his concert tour is going. You can find that information, I think, in the next probably week or so at ericchurch.com.
Yep, wonderful.
You can get online there and see, because I think we've asked to try to get the product into retailers near the concert venue itself.
Right.
But you should be able to look up that information through ericchurch.com.
Wonderful.
Perfect.
Thank you for that.
Chris, man, thank you. We held you a little long, but I got like 10 more questions. We could hang out all night, because especially now that we're like 2-3 shots in. So
you're 2-3 shots in.
Oh yeah, because I'm
over here enjoying these. Man. You got the bottles in front of you.
But Chris, thank you so much for taking the time and educating us a little bit. We'd love to talk to you again.
Yes.
Because I'm sure we've merely just, with 140 years behind Jack Daniel's, we just scratched the surface.
Yeah, absolutely. I love to talk about how we make our whiskey, and I think that's such an important thing. And like we just said earlier, with the current resurgence of American whiskeys, and so many different brands out there. It's the questions of, well, how is it made, and where is it made, and who is making it? Those are all just so important to what we do here in Lynchburg, with every drop of Jack Daniel's coming out of this one location, this one distillery, to supply the whole world.
Right.
So yeah, anytime you guys would like to talk whiskey, you know where to find me.
Right on.
Absolute pleasure, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Be well.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye. There it is. Voodoo. Matthew.
James.
That was
Jamie. That was Chris he's so well rounded.
Yeah.
He really he knows his stuff.
I mean, he's like buried deep in it, because his grandfather was there his grandfather was a master distiller since 1966.
Right.
That's like when Brian was in his 20s. Donovan's sitting here just working.
Yep.
What do we do? Use him as a punching bag.
There you go.
So, But so it just immersed in it for years and years.
But I'll tell you, the whole Nearest Green story, that just to learn the roots of Jack Daniels itself, it goes all the way back to you have to go to church. That is it.
That is.
You have to stop distilling, but you have to go to church.
Take me to church.
So what does he do? He said okay, and then ended up working for Jack Daniels.
I love it. Love it.
It's so much fun.
So there you go, Man Cave Happy Hour.
Yeah,
Jack Daniels style.
Yeah. Well, pay attention. We'll have another show coming up here in a couple of weeks.
That's it, Matt.
Cheers.
Cheers.